Thatching a roof is a traditional skill that dates back thousands of years. It is still used on houses in Britain to this day. It takes many years of training to become a master thatcher. Because of the nature of the trade, every thatcher puts their own unique touch to each roof that they build. However, the core skills are relatively the same. We are by no means master thatchers, but we do have great enthusiasm and a willingness to learn. So join us on this adventure into ancient history, back to the Iron Age, where ancient Celts once occupied much of Britain.
Are we doing a time or not?
I think actually let's just tuck through in here, get to here, because we're going to have to kink round at an angle.
Right.
Welcome to another episode of the Celtic Roundhouse, where today, finally, after so many months, we are putting the roof on, we're thatching the roof. It's been a long time coming. This is a very similar situation to the Anglo-Saxon house that I thatched. We had a good kind of few months break before we then started building it again. This year it's now due to COVID-19, so yeah, it's been a bit of a pain, but we're finally here, and the material that we're using for our thatch is water reed. We've got this locally from Somerset. We're based in Somerset here in the woodlands in the southwest of England, and this is from probably about half an hour away. The reason we're using water reed is because it's very, very durable. It's quite rot resistant because it grows in the water in damp conditions, so it sheds water really well. And this type of technique that we're doing, thatching roofs, is still done in England today on houses. It can last, well, if done properly, it can last up to 50 years, but most of the time, I'd say on average, people would change the thatch on their house every 25 to 30 years. So, you know, this structure might probably fall down before the roof actually breaks down. But we're really pleased to be working with this material. It's a very traditional technique that stretches back hundreds and thousands of years. So we've got the dogs with us today. They are doing absolutely no work in helping us, but they're enjoying themselves. Thank you so much for watching the episode. We're going to crack on. I'm going to tell you more about thatching, more about the equipment that we're doing further into the episode. But for now, let's get finishing this roof. As we lay down the thatch on the roof, we are pinning it to the cedar battens using a long piece of thin ash known as a ligger and a twisted hazel spike known as a spar. This simple technique looks very easy, but it's actually very tricky to get right. Each small bundle or yealm of water reed wants to slide off the roof as soon as we cut the cordage that is binding it together. So it becomes a case of pinning the thatch down to stop it sliding, and then securing it down with hazel spars and cordage. Although natural cordage would have likely been used by the Celts thousands of years ago, we are recycling the cordage that binds each yealm together. This way, it saves us having any wasted material on this project, and it's also much more durable. Once the first layer of thatch is laid down, we begin work on the second layer, the base of which will overlap the layer below it to create a thick, waterproof covering.
So we're making pretty good progress on the thatch itself. You can see we've started to blend it in. I'll talk to you guys about techniques and equipment and things that we've been doing a little bit later on. Problem is we have 140 yealms, which is the bundles, the small bundles of water reed. We have 140. We've got 6 left, and you can see 6 is not going to go very far on the Roundhouse. So the plan is to get more thatch. We reckon we're going to need another 45, around about that, 45 yealms. As well as that, we are out of these. The hazel spars, these split hazel spars or twisted hazel spars. We had 200 of these to start with, we're now out. Plus, the long, thin liggers which are used to pin the thatch down, the spars pin this down. We have maybe 6 of these left. So we grossly underestimated how much we would need for this build, but it's going to be worth it. So we're going to quickly go and get some thatch from the local barn nearby here in Somerset, where it's very traditionally grown and harvested, and also it's on so many thatched houses around here in Somerset and in the southwest. So yeah, we're going to take you there, show you where we get the thatch, and then we'll get the rest back on the house.
There are 3 main types of thatch material used on roofs: water reed, combed wheat straw, or long straw. But there is also heather, turf, rye straw, and veldt grass. The last 4 are likely the oldest of materials that were used many years ago. However, they are much harder to source and require a lot more skill to apply them to a roof. Long straw is also a fairly traditional material to use, and it can have a more shaggy appearance as the straw is laid on the roof with both ears and butts of the material facing downwards. As a result, it is quite a labour intensive material to apply, and it generally has a shorter lifespan of around 15 to 25 years. Combed wheat straw is a byproduct from producing grain. To make it requires traditional machinery. The invention of the combine harvesters has meant that it is now quite a specialist product. Most ridges of thatched houses these days are made of combed wheat reed. The material has a lifespan of around 25 to 35 years. The final material, and the one that we have chosen for the roof of our Celtic roundhouse, is water reed. Because of the nature of where and how it grows, water reed is highly durable, hard wearing, and it has the longest lifespan of all of the thatching materials. In fact, there is still some evidence of thatched water reed roofs which are over 60 years old.
Ready? It's literally piling down there. You can try it. Last one.
You might be wondering why we did not source this material ourselves. There are two main reasons for this. Firstly, none of these materials can be found in the forest where the Roundhouse is located. Secondly, much of where this natural material grows is either on privately owned land, or it grows in what is known as an area of outstanding natural beauty, or a site of special scientific interest, which in simple terms means that it is growing on land that is in a conservation zone and is therefore protected. Traditional Celtic roundhouses had either straw or heather as the thatch material for their roofs. Some would even have mud placed on the thatch to add insulation and keep the heat in.
Okay, seeds. So, just to give you perspective, this is day 3 of thatching the Roundhouse. We've been to collect the thatch a number of times now from the barn, which you guys saw. It's a very time-consuming process. It's very rewarding, but at the same time, it soaks up the hours. But I just thought I'd take 5 minutes just to talk to you guys about what the techniques we're using and the kind of terminology that's used in the thatching industry. It's a very traditional technique, especially here in Britain. The tradition is still carried on to this day, but depending on where you live in the country, the terminology differs slightly. So the first thing is the thatch. That's this material here. This is what we are using, and it is water reed. This particular water reed is shorter than the water reed that I used on the Saxon house. This one's about, well, it's over 5 feet, just about. But the one I was using on the Saxon house was kind of up here, maybe 6-7 feet, slightly longer, slightly thicker water reed. Now this, why water reed? Well, it's a very durable natural material. Obviously it grows densely around water, and it's just highly durable. It's highly resistant to things like rot and breakdown, and it just grows in really harsh environments. And this is why it's used as a roofing material to this day. So a lot of you might be thinking, we're laying this thatch, this water reed, the wrong way. It should be this way on the roof, with the seed heads going down. And it's a very common thing that people, I get comments on YouTube, and it is not the correct way to lay thatch. You need to lay thatch with the hollow end, which is the thick stem end, facing down, and that way you get a really good taper on the roof and you get a good runoff. Essentially you're laying it down on the roof the way that it would grow in the ground, and that's just the way it is. It's the way the water would shed off it. That's why it can shed water so easily, because of where it grows. You lay it with the thick end down. It's just the way it's done. So I know a lot of people might be watching thinking, well, why is it done that way? That is because you get a much better shape. You need that thickness at the bottom to then get the curve of the roof coming up. So water reed is a hollow stem. I'll show you close-ups in a minute. You can't really see it there, but it's a hollow stem, and it tapers down to the seed head. Now the seed head on this water reed, it can differ depending on what type of water reed you're using, but this is the seed head on this, and actually you can see it's going to seed already. It's had a good blasting where we've moved it around, but that's the seeds essentially coming out there. If I focus, if it will focus, all the tiny white fluffy seeds are just ready to come out. And we keep all this on. It adds all insulation to the thatch roof house as it is. So we like to keep all of this on. Don't need to take it off. And it's just, yeah, it's a very good resource and nice, easy resource to work with. The next item that we use with the thatching is what's called a ligger, or what I know is known as a ligger from around where I am. This is simply, this one in particular that we're using today is ash, and it's been split. So it's nice and thin, and it's tapered at the ends so that it can go into the spars and we can carry on linking it around the Roundhouse. That's why it tapers at both ends. Traditionally on the Saxon house, the Anglo-Saxon house, I used hazel liggers, and they were quartered, so it was one big round of hazel that was split into 4, and it does the same thing. It's bendy, and it's used to pin the thatch down. So I've got my thatch here, and what we would do is we would get these liggers, pin the thatch to the battens underneath, and then the way that we would pin it is with this, which is called a twisted hazel spar. So the wood is hazel, and at the top when it's green, it's been twisted to make it into these kind of chopsticks which have been whittled down to a point on each end. So the ligger goes down on the thatch, the spar, the twisted hazel spar, you stab each side of the ligger, you can bang it down with your hand, and that then pins the thatch to the battens below. Now we are also using cordage to secure the liggers to the battens below as an extra, you know, a bit of reinforcement, because we want this roof to last. So we've used cordage to really pin this down. Now in modern day thatching, these liggers will be essentially steel bars, small thin steel bars, and they would be drilled down and with a special tool drilled down into the batten below, and it would be under immense pressure so that the thatch would never slide. And that's because it's on modern day houses, people don't want to be changing their thatch. They need it, you know, regularly. They need it done really well. So that would be drilled down and pinched down really hard. But obviously we're trying to keep it as traditional as we can. So we're using cordage and we're using these hazel spars instead of steel wire. So you can see where we're at now. I mean, we've done a good job, haven't we, Dustin? It's not bad for 3 days, pretty solid work.
3 days. Has it been hard work?
It's been enjoyable, that's the thing. It is enjoyable.
I've learned a lot in 3 days. I've never done this before. Mike, he's the professional. He's
Hardly.
done loads of
This
these.
is the second time I've ever done it, so it's you know, it's new to us both. But you can see how we've got the taper coming up to the curved ash entrance, which is there. We are blending it as we go, which is another thing I'll talk about in a minute. But you can see just up there, there's the spars we're using. There's a bit of cordage, like we say, we're tying it down and reinforcing it, and there is the twisted hazel spars that are pulling down those ash liggers. And we're getting near the top of the roof now, so we're making very good progress, and it's starting to look like a proper Celtic Iron Age roundhouse. The clay has cracked loads. We'll talk about that in a separate video. That's where we didn't put the roof on first, which we should have done. Roof first, then clayed the walls, so the clay has been exposed to the elements, and it's dried and it's got wet and dried and got wet and dried, and it's made more cracks. So it's okay because the roof's on now, and we will sort the walls when we next have a bit more time. So one of the other things I'm doing, we're both doing, is blending the thatch. So in the previous Saxon house build, I'll pop an episode up here of when I was thatching that one. You'll see that when I laid the yealms on top of the battens, we kind of did them in a large row, and then we lashed it all down and put the spars in and the liggers in, and then we tried to blend it essentially. And it just took a long time, and it was quite difficult because it was all pinned down. We were having to really whack it quite hard. What we found with this particular episode is to blend it kind of as we go, rather than laying it all down and trying to do it when it's pinned down quite hard. So we'll be doing it around the base like this once we've finished, and we'll tidy up all that base, and essentially we're whacking and compressing that thatch, which as it's going over a ligger, if you imagine it's pinned down, it's going to go, the thickness is going to go in taper to the thin, and it's going to pin it there. So it's going to get tighter as you do it. Now, the traditional tool that's used with thatchers, master thatchers, is what's called a drifter or a legget, depending on, again, where you're from, how old you are, it varies. And essentially it's a piece of wood with a kicked out handle that you can just use to whack
the thatch nice and smooth. Now the difficulty we've got is we don't have a legget because we're not thatchers, but we're just using a piece of flat wood. This is a piece of plywood, I believe, which we've just shaped with the handle here. The downside of this is great, it can blend the thatch fine, but it's not a kicked out handle, so we're whacking our knuckles every time we're doing this, and it makes your knuckles quite raw because the end of the thatch is sharp. But it does the job and we're quite pleased with it. So I'm using the terminology blending, but it's traditionally called dressing. You're dressing the thatch. Maybe that's linked to hairdressing, who knows? I'm not sure of the historical background of that particular piece of terminology, but essentially we're blending the thatch. So you can see we've not blended it immaculately smooth like you'll see on thatched houses here in England, but you know, you can see the lines of where we've laid each yealm, and we don't mind as long as it does the job of shedding rain. That's the main thing. Well, that is it. That's the end of this episode of the Celtic Roundhouse. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you have enjoyed the progress that we've made today and joining us on this awesome adventure into history, into British history, thousands of years ago, and using traditional techniques and tools of that time. It's been good. Do check out Dustin's channel. He's done a little bit of behind the scenes of the thatch journey that we did of getting the thatch, which was almost a full day. So if you'd like to check that out, I'll put a link in the description below. And he's also done a version of this video as well. We've got more to do with the roof. You can see we're not quite there yet, if you can have a look. We've got the cap to put on and everything, but it's been a hell of a trip, guys. Thanks for joining me, and I'll catch you in the next one.